Really happy to introduce Alex Lynd, USB cat widget. And he's going to show you all about making your own Wi-Fi attack device. So
USB attack.
USB attack. Thank you.
Let's go.
Yes. Okay. You've been here all weekend, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you'll be around tonight?
I should be, yeah.
A little bit? Okay, cool.
Unless I wear out the rest of my brain capacity.
Yeah, I hear you. Anyway, thanks for being here. Please unplug the soldering irons when you're done with them. And otherwise, have a great time. Hand it over to Alex.
Thank you. Cool. So before we dive in, I'm going to distribute the kits. A lot more of you guys showed up than I thought, so we might have a limited amount. But yeah, I'm going to start by just passing these around, and I'll give a limited quantity to each table. So maybe I'll do 4 per table for now. For now, I'm doing 4 per table. I'm going to see if I have enough to come back around. Are you guys part of the workshop? Cool. Yeah. No worries. Cool. And
oh, hell yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5. Huh?
We don't all need one. Yeah, I think we're
okay, cool.
Grouped up.
Nice. I'll probably see you guys at future conferences anyways and just give you a free one because I know you. Okay, I have 2 more left over. I figured this table, I need one. Huzzah. Then I have 1 more remaining, I hope. Yeah. Woo. All right, so we're going to get started with the workshop. Yeah. Okay, so for a brief introduction, this is the USB attack workshop. This is the USB attack workshop. We're going to be talking about curriculum in just a second. I just distributed all of them, but you're free to watch. Oh, okay. Had. I think probably 25. So I'm going to start off with just a brief introduction about myself. So my name is Alex Lynd. What do? I make videos on the internet, and I also like hacking computers. More specifically, I am a cybersecurity content creator. I create videos on channels like Hack5 and mostly do cybersecurity education. So I make educational hacking tutorials, mostly hardware focused. My domain is wireless hacking. And today you guys are going to take a look at one of the products that I develop in order to teach that actually. These are some of the other projects that I've worked on in the past. I didn't do such a great job documenting these on my slides, but my most recent project is a GPS tracker kit that takes advantage of Wi-Fi networks called DNS Drive-By. You can find that on my YouTube channel if you're interested. I also create reactive PCB jewelry art. This is an earring that I designed that detects your heart rate based off a pulse oximeter sensor and flashes lights. And then these are some videos that I created. This is one of my favorite wireless payloads I developed at one point. Basically what it is, it's not a mail bomb, but it's like a $10 wireless payload that you can actually mail like to a company or a corporation. You can address it to a fake employee so it sits in their mailroom. It gathers wireless reconnaissance and gets shipped back to you. So as you can imagine, this video got taken down a week after posting it for 2 reasons. 1 is nefarious, but also 2, shipping regulations. You can't ship a LiPo battery. So that's kind of stupid. If you guys want to check that out, that's my personal YouTube, and I'm also on Hack5. So what are we doing today? I like to hurt computers, so, right? They wouldn't let me do a rage room, but hopefully they'll consider that maybe next year. So I'm going to teach you guys how to hurt computers with USB attacks this time around. What we're also going to be doing, you guys are going to be putting together your own USB Nugget. It's a cat-shaped development board. We'll talk more about features in a second. And more specifically, we're going to learn how to use this for constructing keystroke injection attacks. The Thai food is getting to my sinuses, so I'm sorry if I cough. So first and foremost, what is the Nugget and why should you care about it? The Nugget is a cat-shaped console that I developed. Basically, when I got started with hacking, I was introduced to a lot of like black box type devices that weren't exactly beginner friendly or intuitive, or they just presumed you had like some working knowledge of hacking, but sort of fell flat when it came to like education or teaching you what you're doing with the device. I still kind of see this even with popular tools like the Flipper nowadays, where lots of script kiddies will like pick this thing up, they'll use them to run attacks, but they don't exactly know what they're doing. So kind of what I'm hoping to do with my tool, and it's still in the development phase, is fill that educational gap and teach people how to use this for running Wi-Fi attacks, USB attacks, or other cybersecurity topics. In addition, a side goal that I'm working on with the project is also making prototyping easier. So with the built-in like cat graphics and on-screen interface, I'm hoping to create like interactive lessons that show you like how to hook up hardware, how to hack stuff, etc. So one of the flagship softwares that I currently demonstrate is called the USB Nugget. So this is one of many firmwares that I developed for this product. That's what we're going to be taking a look at today. So I'm going to be showing you guys basically how to use this tool to run keystroke injection and USB attacks. You'll get the full rundown of different techniques that hackers use when exploiting computers over USB. And you'll also learn how to write your own fun prank payloads. So this is a payload I used to ship by default on these kits at workshops, but I had to disable it because people would fuck their shit up. But this one's really fun. What it does is when you plug it in, it'll run a script that disables your keyboard and mouse. It starts this like aneurysm-inducing color flashing script. It downloads a bunch of shit onto your home screen and then also pulls up a riproll. Essentially, you can't stop it because your keyboard and mouse is disabled, so you have to restart your computer. But I was getting too much feedback where people had like unsaved work and things like that, so I took that one off. So a lot of you guys are nerds. You might be interested in what's running under the hood of this device. This is probably my favorite microcontroller. It's called the ESP32S2. It's a chip made by Espressif. Basically, what's really cool about it, my two favorite features are the Wi-Fi capability and also native USB. And you can get this for like around $2 to $3 on AliExpress. So the Wi-Fi is really fun. This lets you do things like some very basic Wi-Fi attacks, and also allows the device to host an access point, actually. So a cool feature that I coded with that, your nuggets can also be controlled from a Wi-Fi interface. So if you wanted to run remote attacks over Wi-Fi or like plant it somewhere, you can do that. And of course, the main feature that we're focusing on today is native USB, which can be used to emulate USB devices for USB attacks. So without further ado, we'll dive into the soldering class. So I presume most of you guys have soldered before, but do we have any first timers? Okay, good. So I'll skip over some of the baby steps here. But basically, if you haven't soldered before, don't do this. I'm sure they created these stock photos with the intention of showing you what not to do with the soldering iron, but this is the part that gets hot. Don't touch it. If you haven't soldered before, don't worry. We'll come around and show you what to do. But let me just tell you guys what you're going to be getting in your kits to make sure you have all the parts. So basically, there's 4 electronic components. You guys will also want to pry your kits apart if you haven't. You can just, on the bottom of the nugget, you can just remove the case and everything should fall out. Nothing is assembled. All these parts are just put into place. So the screen and microcontroller and everything comes apart. But you should have 4 parts for the electronics. You should have the main cat-shaped board. You should have the screen, microcontroller, and female header. Some of the female headers fell out, so I'll get those distributed. You guys might want to pass that around. And then you should also have 3 parts for the 3D printed enclosure. You should have the top, bottom, and D-pad. Once you guys have all the parts, this is going to be the first step. I'll come around to make sure you guys have it mounted right. But the first thing we'll do is you'll take your Nugget circuit board and you'll flip it onto the backside. There should be clear instructions that say solder me first, so it's like kind of hard to screw this up. You'll mount the microcontroller onto it, and then I'll show you how to properly tack down these solder joints. I'll come around. No, that's a design feature, not a flaw. Yeah, that's mounted the correct way. Yep, that's good. I have a short flashing guide under the guides section. Should say flashing with a web browser. So I want to briefly talk about this tool, and also don't worry if you haven't finished assembling your boards yet. I'll make sure everyone's caught up. But typically, if you're flashing a microcontroller, you might have to go through some convoluted process, set up an Arduino, flash via command line or something like that. What's really cool is Google Chrome actually has an experimental feature called Web Serial that lets you interface with microcontrollers completely from a web browser. So we're going to be using this today to flash our board so you guys don't have to get set up with a whole tool chain or SDK or anything like that. So you'll have to install Chrome or a Chrome-based browser. And once you're on this web page, the last thing you'll have to do is download our latest binary file. So you can see that linked here. You can just click on Nugget firmware, and then it should download a .bin file. After that, you can pretty much follow along with the instructions on this web page. But just for redundancy, I'm going to explain how this works. So you've downloaded Chrome, you've downloaded the binary file. The next thing that you'll need to do is put your device into DFU mode or device firmware upgrade. The way that you can do this is through a sequence of button presses. It's pretty simple. You'll notice that your Nugget has 2 buttons. It has a 0 button and a reset. The way that you'll place it into DFU mode is first you'll hold down 0 and keep holding it. You'll tap reset and release, and then you'll let go of 0. The 0 button is also equivalent to the boot button. So this basically puts it into a boot or device firmware upgrade mode. You can also see that documented here if you're having trouble. Once you've done that, you'll navigate over to this website that's also on the documentation page. It's a web flashing application. When I open this up in a new tab, let me see if I have a Nugget that I could demo this with. So once you open the web flasher application, it's pretty simple to use. In the top right corner, you'll see a button that says connect. So I wonder what happens if I click on that. Oops, I'm not in a Chrome browser. I screwed up. There we go. So when I hit connect, the device that you're looking for, as I mentioned earlier, this is an ESP32S2 based device. So your Nugget should pop up as an ESP32S2. You'll go ahead and connect to that microcontroller. After it connects, it should identify your device and allow you to upload a file. Once you've done that, you just hit choose a file and select your binary file. One thing to note, if you guys are having trouble with that, I believe I actually flashed a default firmware to your guys' Nugget when you plug it in. That has like a QR code that pops up. So for safety, you might want to hit erase first to overwrite the firmware that's already on there, and then flash the new file. I'd recommend doing that. But yeah, after that, you can just select the binary file that you guys downloaded like so, hit program, and then it's pretty much good to go. Okay, so we're going to get started with the USB attack class. So I noticed most of you guys have already messed around with the default payloads. I heard a lot of rickrolls going off. So basically the way this is structured, I'll start off with a very brief lecture, introduce you guys to some USB hacking concepts, and basically ways that hackers take advantage of USB ports for deploying malware or other kinds of attacks. We'll take a look at some common tools and techniques that are used by hackers, and then more specifically, you'll learn how to write your own attacks using the Nugget. So are any of you guys familiar with USB attacks by chance? Okay, cool. So you might have seen the rubber ducky. Are you guys familiar with this tool? Nice. So this is pretty much like the flagship USB attack product. It's a device that's developed by a company called Hack5, where I actually create content for. But basically, the selling point of this, it's a keystroke injection device. So when it's plugged into a computer, it'll act as a keyboard, which is completely inconspicuous to the computer that it's plugged in as. But it masquerades as a flash drive. So essentially, you can drop this like in a parking lot or in a reception desk or something like that. And someone who's unknowing to this might plug this into their computer, at which this will install malware or some other sort of malicious thing on their computer. Specifically, this takes advantage of a type of USB attack called an HID attack, which is short for Human Interface Device. So the way this works is there is a certain subset of USB devices that are inherently trusted by computers, like keyboards and mice and things like that. Because it would suck if you plugged a keyboard in and you had to install drivers and all these things. It's kind of like pulling yourself up from your bootstraps. It's like, how do you set something up when that's your main way to interface with the computer? So keyboards are trusted by default, mice are trusted by default, and other types of these human interactive devices, we call them HID devices. And the way that we can take advantage of that is by simply emulating them. So when we plug in a device like the Nugget or the rubber ducky into a computer, it'll actually identify itself as a keyboard. The computer doesn't know any better, but what this lets us do is install, or rather, it lets us run a pre-programmed script that contains the keystrokes that you might type if you were sitting behind a computer, except it'll deliver them at superhuman speeds. So you might notice that the rubber ducky on the inside has this SD card here. Basically, if you wanted to put a script on there, you type out all the keystrokes into this SD card, load it in the ducky, plug it into a computer, and it fires off. Similar concept for the Nugget. I also found these terrible stock photos. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about, just a funny picture with pulling yourself up from your bootstraps. Alert, keyboard not found. Press F1 to try to reboot. It's like, how the hell are you going to do that without a keyboard? There are some other types of HID attacks that can happen. Today we're specifically focusing on keystroke injection, because that's probably the most viable way to deliver a payload. Some of my other favorites, mouse. You might have seen products on like Amazon, like mouse jigglers, which you can use to prank your coworker, or depending on how you want to look at it, maybe a productivity tool if you're the lady that I overheard at Starbucks a month ago. So I'm not a creep, but she was like, oh, she was on a phone call. She was like, oh, I'm working 2 full-time jobs. My boss doesn't know because I have this like thing that I bought off Amazon that I plug in and it looks like I'm actually at work while I'm not. But law enforcement also uses this if they seize computers to keep them awake. It's like if they take a computer from a bad guy and they don't want it to shut off, they'll plug one of these into their computers. One of my favorites is emulating a USB Ethernet adapter. So this is really cool. Basically what this does is it allows this device to identify itself as like a router or some other trusted networking device. Even if the computer is turned off, it still wants to access the internet and send out packets and things like that. So there's a pretty cool attack for a completely locked Windows computer. You can plug in a device like the Ducky or some other keystroke injection device, have it identify as a USB Ethernet adapter. You can route traffic through like the Ducky or other keystroke injection tool and actually extract Windows hashes. So you can potentially brute force the password, even when it's completely locked. So this is a little bit redundant. I just talked about keystroke injection, but this is the particular type of attack that we're going to be taking a look at today. Basically, the way it works, this just lets you do anything that you might be able to do if you were physically sitting behind someone's computer, except way faster. So like if you wanted to deploy a piece of malware, you might go behind the computer, pop open a Linux terminal, download a script of some sort, have a whole setup process. You can automate this to happen in just a couple seconds by preforming a set of keystrokes that you can instruct the Nugget or other USB attack device to type out. So let's take a look at some of the other common USB attack tools that you might find on the market. I kept the list a little bit short. So this is another device by Hack5. It's called the Bash Bunny. It's one of my favorites. It's basically just a chonkier version of the USB rubber ducky. It's not nearly as conspicuous, but what's cool about this is it actually has a built-in Linux computer. So you're able to do file IO, file modification, and things like that completely on board with a built-in like actual file system. It also has built-in Bluetooth, which is really cool. So you can use this for triggering or geofencing. One of the interesting things you can do with this is, for example, detecting if certain people enter or leave a room. So if they have like Bluetooth headsets or like a Fitbit or their phone on them, this can detect the presence of those Bluetooth devices and trigger a payload based off whether or not they're around. So I think that's really cool. My personal favorite is the OMG cable. This one masquerades as an actual charging cable. There's a bunch of different form factors this comes in. You have Lightning for Apple devices, USB-C to C, C to A. Same concept. You can basically just like drop this somewhere, leave it plugged in into like a outlet at an airport or something like that. And it's able to deliver keystroke injection payloads. What's also cool about this, it has built-in Wi-Fi as well. So if you wanted to run a remote attack, there's the possibility of doing that. It can also geofence. So if you wanted to ship this like over the mail, it can detect if it's in proximity of like a certain corporate network by looking for the presence of like, I don't know, like Starbucks Wi-Fi or some other known identity. One of my favorite attacks that I saw done with this, that I was also able to replicate on the Nugget, which is built in Wi-Fi, is they did a video demo where they had a Yagi antenna, basically a highly directional Wi-Fi antenna, plug this thing in like about like a quarter or half mile away, and using this, they were able to trigger a keystroke injection payload like with a huge air gap in between them across buildings. And then we have the USB Nugget, the least conspicuous of them all. So I sort of designed this as a way to make it more friendly for people to get started with learning about USB attacks as a sort of intuitive introduction to this kind of thing. I'm still working on the firmware and gamifying the experience, but some of the merits to this device over the more typical like black box hackery-oriented ones. This has a built-in flash drive that makes it really easy for you to upload payloads over a USB interface and also allows you to do data exfiltration relatively easily. It has the built-in Wi-Fi, so if you did want to do remote triggering, that's also possible. And what's also cool is, unlike the Ducky, which is a single-shot payload, you can only run one script. When you're in the wild, you don't actually know what kind of computer you're going to encounter, like Linux, Mac OS, Windows. So with the built-in interface, you can navigate hundreds of payloads. You can select based off the operating system you encounter. And it makes it really easy to just enumerate that way. And also, it's cute. So let's get started with hacking on the USB Nugget. Oh yeah, if you guys want, I already pointed you to the website, but if you also want to find slides and stuff like that, I think this just literally links to usbnugget.com. But going forward, I'm going to be publishing more documentation on this site, and I have a bunch of other interesting features that are probably going to launch in the next month or so. Okay, so we already talked about this. You guys got ahead of me there. I presume most of you guys have already tooled around with the Nugget, so you're familiar with the interface and how to navigate it and such, up, down, left, right. If you haven't seen this already, when you plug it into your computer, it mounts as a USB flash drive. If you want to try that, there's basically two reasons why that is. I actually don't know the order my slides are in. But when you plug this into your computer, just open up your file manager or anywhere else where your flash drives usually mount. This basically makes it really easy to upload payloads to the device. So instead of having to flash it to like an SD card or whatever, you literally just drag and drop a .txt payload. And the second benefit to this is it also makes it easy for data exfiltration. So say you plug this into someone's computer and you want to extract like all their juicy photos or documents or whatever. Instead of needing to exfiltrate them over Wi-Fi or something, built-in flash drive, you just copy and paste it right over. The other thing to note, the way that I set this up by default, as I mentioned, is there's some default operating system-based payloads. And it's a bit redundant, but to reiterate, the reason why this is, you don't know what computer you'll encounter in the wild, so you can have a bunch of them just preset and ready to go. Running payloads, we already did that. Flash drive, cool. All right, so for the next step, we're going to dive into creating your first payload. So I noticed you guys have a bunch of different systems set up here. So what I want you to do is open up the folder, depending on what operating system you're working with. And I want you to create a new .txt file. And you can categorize this under any one of the following recommended categories. These are from the official Hack5 documentation for recommended ways to organize your payloads. So we're going to be creating a prank payload. I'd recommend creating your text file under a prank folder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that up here too, so you guys can follow along. So one thing to note, be gentle, but I develop all the firmware by myself. So if you encounter any bugs, I'd first off like to hear about them. But one of them that you should know about, working with a USB mass storage class device or writing the firmware for that is a pain in the ass. So there's one bug where if you copy and paste a text file, this can actually cause some issues on the file system. So I'd recommend just creating a new text file instead of doing Control-C, Control-V for an existing payload. Just be aware of that. Yeah, the text is cool. Cool, so once you've created a blank text file, I'm gonna walk you guys through the basics of creating a payload, and then we'll also talk about the scripting language also, yes.
Posting recommendation. Notice that all the key points are the exact same.
The what now?
All the one thing. Yeah, but now with MAC address, you can the last 4 digits, and then you make a name after it. So that becomes a bluebird or whatever, red or whatever, right? And then it becomes much more memorable what it is, especially if you have a dozen people in the same room. Right. I'll take this thing with the last. Wait, Alex, I deleted the directory and now I'm over the yeah, probably. Did you try to create one?
Okay, cool. So let's briefly talk about payload methodology and how to construct a payload before we dive right into the syntax. My slides are a little bit out of order. Okay, so the basic approach that I take when I'm constructing a payload is a technique that I just call working backwards. So the first thing I typically want to do is identify what the payload actually does. Am I creating a stager payload that downloads a Python script that installs malware? Am I putting a raunchy Harry Potter fan fiction on my friend's computer? Or am I launching a Rickroll attack? Right, so for this first example, I was going to do constructing a Rickroll attack, but I forgot that I already have that installed by default. I'm still gonna walk you guys through how to construct this. Please don't cheat. But yeah, the first step is usually identify the goal. So what it is you're trying to execute with this attack script. And the 3 steps follow as such. The second is identify the intermediate steps or programs that need to be launched. Right, so if I am creating like a Python stager, I'll have to open a terminal. I'll have to launch Python. I'll have to access a web URL that has the malware potentially. In this case, if I'm running a Rickroll attack, I'll need to open up a web browser, a particular URL, and such. So basically identify the linear steps that need to happen and write them down. This is really useful. The third step is outlining the actual pseudocode. So again, this is a keystroke injection attack. So you want to think about what you would be doing if you were behind a computer and using a keyboard. The way that I like to do this is step through it manually without using my trackpad. So I'll try the different key combinations, see if I can pop open a Linux terminal manually, see if I can type everything out without cheating and using my mouse, and then also write those down and outline them. And then the fourth step is translating that into the actual scripting language. DuckyScript is really simple. There's basically 3 commands you have to know, and I'll show you what those are at the end. But we're going to dive into the second step since we know what the scope of our payload is. I want you guys to construct your own Rickroll attack. So you've already created the blank text file. So what I want you guys to do, take just 1 minute, write out basically as many linear steps as you can for what you think it would take to launch a Rickroll attack. Maybe you have to pop open a search console. Maybe you have to open up Chrome, a terminal. Just take 1 minute to do that inside of your text file. If you guys don't want to recreate the Rickroll, this is a fun one. You can also do like a crypto prank website or something dumb like that. Oh, wait, no. What the hell is this? Crypto, let me find it. Oh, yeah. So you can just, if you don't want to do the Rickroll, you can also open up some random website of your choice, like this stupid cryptocurrency locker website, or maybe a fake Windows reboot website or something like that. It doesn't have to be a Rickroll particularly.